Good morning. It's my pleasure to introduce our next panel. It's going to be a great panel about the impact of the universities on the startup community. And we are going to start with our panel host, Arsh Haque, the director of the Portland State Business Accelerator, right here in the back. And then joining Arsh will be our panelists. First, Brian Wall, Associate Vice President of Research, Innovation, and Economic Impact from Oregon State University. Go Beavers. Travis Woodland, the Director of Innovation and Intellectual Property of Portland State University. Go Vikings. Christine Dixon Thiesing, am I saying that right? Thanks, Christine. Associate Vice President for Industry, Innovation, and Translation, University of Oregon. Go Ducks. And finally, Philip Barish, the Senior Alliance Manager, New Ventures of Oregon Health and Science University. Go medical industry. Welcome all panelists. Have a great session.
So I think we have slides. I'm going to find out what this button does. It doesn't do much. Exciting times. Oh, no, it does. Phenomenal. So I'll be your panelist, Arsh Haque, pronouns they, them, and I'll be facilitating today's panel. And I think intros are probably a good way to set the tone and stage, but we'll be talking about investing in your next startup, in your next venture, the Oregon University startup ecosystem. So we have a lot of folks from various universities, myself included. I'll give a brief introduction on my side. So I am primarily a former founder, also a queer, neuroatypical person of color, which is to say I did not talk about cap tables at the dinner table growing up. In fact, I usually wasn't invited to those tables. And as a student and then faculty and now a staffer, universities have often been the place where I could go to get a book out of the playbook to understand how to navigate this landscape. And so over time, transitioned to now being the director of the Business Accelerator at Portland State University, now being able to provide that playbook to others as others had been wanted to do for me. And our panel is full of folks that have helped people like me in the past and can provide those introductions, starting from Brian at OSU.
Great. Hey, thanks everyone. Appreciate it. In my short, brief intro, I'll say a couple things. Couple of headlines the last few years. NuScale Power goes public for $2 billion at New York Stock Exchange. Agility Robotics raises a Series B $150 million round. Impria Corporation gets acquired by JSR for $514 million. These are just some of the headlines in the last 3 years of companies that have done incredibly well. And the one common thread is they all started at Oregon State University. So we have provided and continue to provide a suite of resources, programs and connections from concept to launch to growth, and really partner with entrepreneurs and investors throughout the entire time frame to help make sure that startups are successful in how they launch, but also in how they grow and stay in Oregon and beyond.
Great, appreciate the intro. There's a chance that these are a slightly different order than the mic'd order, but I'll adapt. Travis, if you care to share.
All right, I was actually expecting to wait a few minutes. Okay, so hi, I'm Travis Woodland. I'm the Director of Innovation and Intellectual Property at Portland State University. And our slide has the most logos on it. I'll try to explain why. It's in part because we have I think a unique setup at PSU. We have an overarching brand called Propel PSU, which includes my office, focused on work that's coming out of the university and investing in patents, investing in innovators, investing in authors that are producing marketable copyright materials. And we really try to take what's happening, what your tax dollars are paying for at the state and federal level, and help make an impact with those outside of our walls. Very often, especially in the hard sciences, that takes the form of a patent in a startup company, or many patents into a startup company. And we actually have kind of a unique setup where my office, Arsh's PSBA, and then, I don't know if Abigail's here, but we do have Stacy from the Center for Entrepreneurship. We really try to help innovators at various stages. And so at the PSBA, obviously they're working with companies. That's not only companies that are coming out of university research, but also companies that are in the larger community, the greater Portland area, and providing them with mentorship, resources, space, all of those things. I'm of course focused on research coming out of the university, and then the Center for Entrepreneurship is working with students at the university and really even outside our university through various programs like inventorship competitions, entrepreneurship competitions, doing a lot of really important training to give those students the confidence they need to be an entrepreneur and to go into the world as entrepreneurs to develop their own ventures that might be investable for you someday. And so we try to hit every point in that ecosystem. We are curating a pipeline of not only the entrepreneurs, but then the intellectual property that they might pull into their companies. And then we have a place for them to live at the PSBA when they get to that stage.
Grand. And up next is Christine from UO.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Christine Dixon Thiesing with the University of Oregon, as of October 1st, that is, just to be clear. I'm happy to be here. I am head of the IIT team, which is charged with maximizing the impact of UO's research enterprise through commercialization. So we do that through finding licensing partners to advance our intellectual property to the market, as well as new venture formation. So how can we help these startups be successful long-term? We work together closely with our sister institution, Launch Oregon, which just kicked off in the spring of this year, so that we can provide a full continuum of support from that napkin stage drawing all the way to these companies that are now venture ready.
Lovely. And then to round us out, Phil.
All right, good morning, everyone. I'm Phil Barish, the New Ventures Manager at OHSU. I'm sure most of you are familiar with Oregon Health and Science University, the largest hospital in the state. But even though we don't have sports teams and a mascot, we are much more than just a hospital. OHSU is the only academic medical center or institution in the state of Oregon and was recently recognized by Reuters as the number 42 most innovative university in the entire world. So we're prolific. In 2022, I think we had a new patent application filed every other day and a new technology licensed or optioned from the university every 3 days. We typically have somewhere between 3 to 6 startups come out of the university every year, and those startups have raised over $2 billion in equity financing. So we support all of that through what we call OHSU Innovates, which is a collaborative network of resources and individuals that support the entrepreneurial ecosystem at the university. That includes our tech transfer office that kind of develops and protects our intellectual property, collaborations and entrepreneurship team that provides mentorship, education, and financial resources for startups, and Oak Tree, which is the Oregon Clinical Translational Research Institute that synergizes with a lot of what we do in the collaborations and entrepreneurship team. So happy to be here. Thank you.
Grand, and an incredible set of work. So often, to sort of set the stage for the remainder of the session, when we talk about the startup ecosystem, we talk about founders and we talk about VCs. Maybe we'll talk about accelerators and incubators, but universities play a critical part. And so we'll be able to dive more deeply into all of the various initiatives that the universities in Oregon are going through. And so we'll do that for around 25, 30 minutes, the questions that I lead to investigate specific pastures and then open it up to the audience towards the end. So to kick things off before we get into the weeds, Christine, we have a lot of folks here, including all of those backgrounds, founders, VCs, investors, students, and future founders. Care to set the stage and framing of how BVC attendees can interact with universities and our organizations?
Most certainly. We recognize that we are within an academic environment and we need to bring the outside in. So first of all, one of the reasons why I do what I do is because I had been a founder at an academic startup, brought something to the light of day, and then realized there were so many other technologies, innovations that could change the world, save lives, that were sitting on the shelves of academic institutions. So I'm here to implore you all to work with us. If you're a potential founder looking for your next gig, talk to us. We have a wealth of opportunities across the 4 of us in ways that we can engage. We also have programming to help support those new startups as well. So first of all, consider it as an inventory you can go through for potential next opportunities. We're also always looking for mentors. Our startups are early stage. Sometimes they have outside management. Sometimes they're founded by our faculty who have never started a company before. And we really want to be sure that if a company's going to fail, it fails fast. So we're always looking for insight from the market. We're always looking for insight from the investment community about the viability of the potential company that we're proposing. So we would love to use you all as sounding boards. We're not always coming with our hands out asking for money. Some of our companies are entirely too early for that, but we still need insight from the investment community about what direction to go. And then finally, we do sometimes come out with our hands out asking for money as well. So we do have companies that we are maturing to the point, Brian gave some fabulous examples of those that have gone public and had major acquisitions on the table. But we need to get there, right? It's a process. And so especially with the angel investment community, it's a key bridge from academia and the support that we're standing up, getting first money into these companies and getting them capital ready for the venture community as well.
Grand. Any other additions? And I'll, for the Q&A format in this section, probably start with the person, but if anyone has additions, feel free to make those. But if not, can transition to the next. Grand. So something Christine mentioned was a lot of the founders that come out of universities and academia are faculty, occasionally students, folks who don't always have the deepest background in business, let alone entrepreneurship. And so they might ask day one, pre-product of, okay, I want to go raise from VC. And it's useful to have the enthusiasm of feeling like an entrepreneur and wanting to go on that track. But it's not something all faculty and students have. Often it's a subset. And so Travis, if you can begin our dive into the weeds, how do you get faculty and students to begin to see themselves as not just those identities, but as other roles like entrepreneur?
Yeah, sometimes it's actually really difficult to have a faculty member or even one of their graduate students see themselves as entrepreneurial. There are barriers there that are really mental hurdles for them. They generally have been in academia for a very long time. They believe in openness of ideas. They may not have very much understanding of intellectual property, the value of that, and making sure you protect it early. They may not feel like they are prepared to put part of their research out into the world as a product. That's actually a very scary thing to do. They're very comfortable, arguing with their colleagues over what the best way to measure something or build something or whatever it is they're working on might be. But to go out and try to build a product and then ask the public to say, is this worth purchasing? Is this service worth having? That's a really scary question for a lot of academics. And so to answer Arsh's real question, we actually have a lot of programs that help build that confidence and give them the skills to do just that. Many academics have no idea what a business model canvas or a business model of any kind would look like. Understanding that investment from VCs versus founders versus getting money from an SBIR or some other non-dilutive capital. They really only have a high level, if any, understanding about what that progression looks like, where your company needs to be when you're asking for certain kinds of money from certain kinds of people, and honestly, they need a lot of advice. And so that's why we have programs. Some of the institutions have programs like Brian's over at OSU, where they'll take very early stage founders and they'll put them through an incubator program. A lot of that is the fail fast if the idea is just flat out not a good product. But then if it gets through that stage, then there's a lot more work done on bringing in mentors, bringing in experts, putting a team together that's going to take this vehicle into the place where it can live at an incubator. It might be ready for a startup, and really helping to form the relationships between folks like you that have expertise either in the industry, in how they should be financed, legal expertise. There's a lot of things that these folks need, and all of that folds into them growing their confidence that they can be entrepreneurs, that this is something that they can succeed at, and very often we're trying to help them do that while staying at the university. We don't want them all to leave. And so, part of that is also helping them see what that company is going to look like through various stages. The very early stage, it can often live kind of partly at the university or at one of our incubators. They're going to have to start trusting people. They're going to have to find people to bring onto a team. They might eventually have to hand it off and go back to being a faculty member most of the time. And so, forming a relationship with them and helping them figure out what questions to ask and giving them the resources to build that confidence and that understanding of what a venture company or a venture destined company looks like, that's the main part of our job when we're trying to create that pipeline for you.
Yeah, any other thoughts from other panelists on that? If not, something you mentioned was beginning to get into what programs materially help introduce the idea of entrepreneurship for faculty, staff, or students, or actually help them grow those businesses. Two panelists for this, so Brian and Phil, could you describe a little bit more of what resources are driving the success of academic startups, either your own or those within the ecosystem?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. As you summarized before the last question, when faculty come to us with ideas, we look at them as wonderful inventors and innovators that maybe don't have the experience or the knowledge on how to build a company. And so it all starts with basically programming to kind of teach them and get them comfortable with kind of doing market analysis, building business plans, et cetera. So we have a program going right now that's called the BIP Corp. It's basically a commercial readiness program where we actually take faculty and inventors and kind of teach them how to do customer discovery, how do you do market analysis, and kind of start that process for them. We connect them with mentors from the industry that can then help educate them and help them actually grow their companies. Beyond just the educational piece, we actually have some grant funding that we can give out to companies, not companies, but actually investigators, to help them take their basic research and do some early scientific kind of studies to evaluate commercial kind of applications of their process. So we can give them between $40,000 to $60,000 to actually run some studies. And then we found this program to be incredibly successful. It's been going on for about 10 years, and over that time we've invested $3 million into studies, and we've had some great results. We have 11 startups that have formed, and over $30 million in follow-on funding that's been raised. So kind of giving them resources, but those resources don't just come with money. We give them project management support. We connect them with mentors at the university. We have an entrepreneur in residence program with various expertise. They're all serial entrepreneurs that can help them grow their company. And then we have my role, the new ventures manager, as well, to help them based on lessons I've learned going through that process. So that's how we think about that.
So you're hearing a common theme here about mentors and early stage education programs. I think at OSU we launched an accelerator 10 years ago, and we realized since that time we had to go back even further, way back into culture building. And so we have a series of programs and efforts under our Vantage Impact program where we launch innovation days. We simply provide and share what resources are available within OSU and external to OSU. And so we're socializing a lot of these ideas kind of way back early in, and we're working with graduate students, we're working with postdocs and faculty. So we're also not completely sold on the idea that we want to transform faculty into becoming entrepreneurs. I personally would prefer they maybe become technical consultants or perhaps chief technology officers for a time period, but we really do need them to at least understand what it takes from where they're at, where their basic research ends, all the way through research, development, and commercialization for them to see their role and part in this. So with our Accelerator, when we launched it a decade ago and where we're at today, we've iterated ourselves kind of through the changes, and on the opening slide you saw iterate, accelerate, launch, and it's a very well-designed program. It's not only open to OSU students and faculty, we do open it to our community members too, who are focused on science and technology-based innovation. And so it's about how to validate an idea, it's about product market fit, it's about launching, and how you go through each phase. And so as you hear common themes of mentors, we always need more mentors to help support each one of those phases as they move forward. You almost think about them as quasi-board members, if you will, at the beginning, just helping give guidance as needed to move these things forward. We operate the programs, and we can only do so much without having external volunteer engagement, as part and parcel of it. But, this suite of activities and these suite of programs, we talk about gap funding as well. All of us have little bits and pieces of a university venture development fund, which is ill-named, by the way, but is a state-run kind of tax credit program that really is is not a venture fund, it's really kind of a non-dilutive source of gap funds that we can put in to help figure out where the market is, maybe help figure the research out a little bit more to get it de-risked along the way.
So some of you might be wondering what this Innovate, Collaborate Oregon is that's on the board. We failed to mention that at the beginning. One of the things that the universities represented here, and we're not excluding anyone else, but we all work together under the banner of Innovate, Collaborate Oregon. And there is a website. There's actually a lot of very interesting information about some of the successes Brian mentioned. Other things that are going on at the university. I think there's still a list of available technologies. If there's something you see that catches your eye, please contact the right folks. But the programs that we've been talking about, we share them among each other quite often. So we've had faculty who have been interested in having a startup, or their students having a startup in the medical field. PSU has very little medical research going on. We do have some that's really interesting, but we don't have a medical school, and so we work with our medical school that's just down the road, and we've had faculty go through the BIP Core program. We've had companies go through the Advantage Accelerator and get some really good results out of that as well. I don't know if we've had anyone go through a UO program, so we're gonna have to fix that at some point.
We're building them as we speak, so.
But we share the resources that we have. We're not exclusive within the programs that are there, and the PSBA is open to anyone who wants to have their startup there. And Arsh has tons of programs that are valuable for entrepreneurs of every stripe and every type of technology. So one of the reasons that we're all up here right now is to kind of drive the point home that we have many programs, some of which are very specific to certain types of industries or tech sectors, and some of which are very generalized. And we help each other out. We help our innovators and our entrepreneurs out whenever possible to get them to the stage where they're going to be ready for you.
And if I could just take a moment to speak to two of our major initiatives at UO. We have the Translational Opportunity Fund, and I told you we do have a carrot out there to try and entice new talent to start up companies around our intellectual property or innovations, and the top is there to do that. So it's tranched funding, $10,000, $25,000, and $250,000 in funding. It can go to faculty research groups. It can also go to startups. They don't have to be faculty-based. They just have to be advancing what's coming out of UO. So we're actively investing in helping these companies achieve commercially relevant milestones and getting them closer to being ready for capital. But then we also have our partner Launch Oregon that I ask you all to check out if you have an opportunity. I think Nick Costas is here somewhere from Launch Oregon. They are actively the capital readiness partner for us in helping these companies be fully prepared to go to the capital markets. They also have a seed fund that can invest up to $250,000 in UO-based startups as well. And again, this is not just faculty-based. So if there's professional management involved, they are also eligible for those funding opportunities.
Something I was surprised about from going from a founder that sometimes worked with universities to working at one was how large the successes are. Because I think of Y Combinator or Techstars typically as the organizations that grow startups well. And something that's incredible and was mentioned in Brian's introduction in part is the successes from universities are often sleeper hits. They're not always the largest brands, but they're often massive impact. And it's often the language talking to faculty or students of entrepreneurship as a vehicle for scaling impact. Nonprofits and foundations are one, certainly, but so is a more profit-driven program. And so I'd love to hear from the panel, starting with Christine, potentially about some of those startup successes, not only the programs that we've given, but some of the stories that have come out of those programs.
Absolutely. I'm pleased to introduce you all to Beth Stormshack. Beth, if you could say hey. Beth is the founder of Northwest Prevention Science, which is a group that is commercializing and implementing the Family Checkup online. So the Family Checkup is an intervention approach that's backed by 30 years of data. So this is an evidence-based approach to mental health interventions for families and children. The non-online version has been implemented through mental health and community mental health organizations globally at this point. They've trained thousands on how to use this intervention, and now they have an online, which is a much more scalable way of implementing this intervention as well. And so at this point, I think you all have trained more than 400 on the online portal approach to the family checkup. They have more than $600,000 in revenue. So this is a viable entity that is moving forward. They're looking for talent to help grow their team, always looking for advisors, people that have any expertise in this space. Just to give you a little context, she's a professor of clinical psychology and human services in our College of Education. So if any of you are interested in mental health and supporting that as well, we'd be very interested in engaging with you all. But please be sure to introduce yourself to Beth as well. We're very thrilled to have her here today.
Exciting. And any other startup successes that folks want to talk about at the panel? No worries. If not, Brian did mention some at the top. But to transition from beyond that, a lot of the times universities aren't one note. They exist within their community and they sort of play their part. I know that's something that we often talk about at PSU. And so often it is not just here are our wins, but as Travis began to mention with IC Oregon, it is winning collectively as a state. It's a relatively small state. A lot of us come from small communities. It's hard to win all on your own. And so there's a lot of affiliations and partnerships. And so Travis and Phil, if you care to share, what are some of the organizations and partnerships you have outside of the university that you work with?
Yeah, I can start. We actually rely a lot on partners that are, in the greater Oregon and really Pacific Northwest ecosystem. Quite a few of our startups have gone through programs at through Virtue Lab and the Cascadia Clean Tech Accelerator. We rely a lot on actually Washington State University and University of Washington for their NSF I-Corps programs, which set high-tech, potential high-growth startups up for receiving SBIR funding and building their business model canvas. It's a pretty fantastic program. We have a lot of our startups have received match funding from Business Oregon, which has been a fantastic source of non-dilutive capital for those. For those of you that aren't aware, they have a couple different flavors of SBIR matching. So if you're working with a high-tech company that has an SBIR grant that has been approved, or they're already in the process of doing that work, Business Oregon has a program where you can get $50,000 for an SBIR 1 and up to $250,000, I think, for a phase 2. Don't quote me on the amounts, but it's non-dilutive capital. It can pay for a lot of things that SBIR funds cannot pay for, like patent costs, like specific types of expenses that aren't allowed, and it's essentially free money for the companies. And so if you're invested in that company, it's more capital that you don't have to put in to get them down the road. We also work with, as I said, the Advantage Accelerator. We've had several companies go through the BIP Corps. There are really a lot of folks that we rely on to really get our startups to the next stage.
Yeah, and building on that discussion, Travis, there's some other programs that Business Oregon puts on that are really, really important. They have a Phase 0 program where they give a $5,000 grant to companies or people getting ready to do companies to actually hire professional grant support to draft SBIR and STTR applications. And what we found is that companies that take advantage of that Phase 0 program actually have a 47% success rate getting their grants funded, which is 3 times the national average. And then that program, once they have success getting their grants, then they roll into the matching grants. So it's a really nice way to kind of jumpstart people and get funding. And then the last couple of years, they've also launched a gap fund. So this is dilutive capital that can be put into companies. But when you think about life science companies, there's a pretty huge gap between leaving the university and being fundable, right? Raising a seed round or a Series A. And so this gap fund from Business Oregon is a really important resource to be that first kind of dilutive capital into the company and help you get to the next stage. Another program I'd love to talk about is the AO Bio program. So we partnered with Oregon Entrepreneurs Network, OTRADI, and OBA to put on this life science specific angel Oregon investing event. This is the first of its kind in the state. It started a couple of years ago. The first fund was $300,000 that was all invested into one single company, so not an insignificant amount of money. Great for the ecosystem at large. Also, we've used this program to actually try and educate the investor community, teach you a little bit about investing into life sciences. How do you do diligence on a company? How do you think about regulatory? So some really great partners, and then all sorts of collaborations with the other universities here on the stage with us. Oregon State has had an ongoing investor pitch event that they put on every summer for quite a long time. And this last year, through IC Oregon, we worked together to open it up and make it an Oregon University pitch event. That was fantastic. We had a number of companies participate in that.
Exciting, and I think well translates to the last of our scripted questions, in that, in part, startups are often some of the most visible successes at a university because they can grow outside of the container of a university. And so to round out the questions, Brian, often universities are working with companies not only to launch them and incubate them, but after that launch, engage with them to help them grow into those larger successes. If you could talk a little bit more about that phase of development.
Yeah, sure. I mentioned in my opening, part of our role is making connections and making sure that we're supporting the growth and growth in the state of Oregon as well. Often, folks don't think about universities that way, but we all have evolved in certain ways, shapes, or forms to play that role because we think it's a meaningful role to play. So, to give you some examples, I'll give you an example with Impria Corporation. So when they launched, we were able to work with them. They were needing access to specialized equipment and services, and we happened to have it on campus. So we figured out a way to allow them to access that equipment for a duration at a reasonable internal cost structure for them to tap into that. We did a creative path where we leased them space on our campus in exchange for them renovating a lab over a 2-year period. And when they left to lease out additional space off campus, that lab was transformed and allowed us to attract a pretty high-end faculty member because we had a set of resources or assets, I guess, that really spoke well to that faculty member coming in. We have, of course, connected with a range of investor opportunities. You mentioned the summer investment program, connections to Business Oregon, connections with also national and international investors that we use. As many of you know, some of you are graduates from your fine Oregon universities, and our alum, we tap into our alum for mentorship opportunities, also board members on occasion, also connections, again, to investor connections as well. And so we're utilizing our alumni network to the benefit of the company. Our role is to how do we help any given startup associated with us tap into every resource we possibly can within any university here and within the ecosystem that we belong. And it's a role that I think we're constantly evolving into. We're trying to push the bounds on how far do we go with this. I think at OSU we went about as far as we possibly could. We speaking to Impria, who utilized all of these services, we actually ended up getting some funding from the state to build out a little bit of an incubator, about $1.125 million. We leveraged that with internal funding and leveraged that with a long-term tenant lease with Impria and another anchor tenant, Valiscore, and ended up putting $12.75 million to renovate the Advanced Technology and Manufacturing Institute, which also serves as an incubator for 10 to 12 startup companies now. So we're in it with everyone here to help these companies go from launch to growth to sustained growth within the state of Oregon, and putting a lot of time, energy, and money into it.
Grand, and I think that well wraps up the scripted Q&A and gets us from ideation and sort of the role that universities play into an investable stage where startups can go. I'll open it up here to questions from the audience, unless...
Yeah, I'll repeat the question so then everyone can hear.
Oh, phenomenal.
Yeah. Well, this was incredible. Thank you all so much. How about a round of applause for these panelists and Arsh? Beautifully done. Do we have any further? Yes. What is SBIR?
Always the acronyms in universities. Good question. SBIR, Small Business Innovation Research Fund grant. It's basically a federal non-dilutive set of dollars that can be obtained. Yep.
And then can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
Universities in general, startups, there's been a lot of stuff in the news from the East Coast ones, like MIT, where they get into hot water trying to take too much of the company. Do you guys take ownership stakes in your companies? Do you say, hey, you worked here while you created this, so it's more of
Okay, so are you taking any ownership in the companies that you're helping build?
The short answer is yes. All of these resources don't come, the state doesn't provide funding for the universities to support these efforts, nor do the universities typically provide support for intellectual property protection. For faculty who, at least at OSU, produce innovations, submit them through our office, utilize a range of these resources and assets, we negotiate a license agreement. And oftentimes a license agreement with a large company would be an upfront valuation with milestones and maybe a royalty base or something like that. With startups, we don't do that. We take an equity position. It's usually at OSU dilutive through the first, non-dilutive through the first round of funding, and then dilutive from that point forward. At the end of the day, it's a negotiation. I will say that my perspective on this is we take a long view of it. The companies I rattled off at the beginning, we've had 15 to 20-year relationships. We've renegotiated the license. We've renegotiated a range of other agreements to make sure that everyone's working in sync and moving forward. And oftentimes it's significantly less than you would imagine.
Yes.
I wonder if you could comment on organizational culture of university-spawned startups. What do you see as the advantages culturally and maybe disadvantages, and how do you work with those startups to optimize?
Yeah, so can you comment on the university culture and the advantages, disadvantages that people might encounter when working in that environment?
So let me ask a clarifying question. You mean the culture of the university towards promoting startup creation, or startups sort of just working with the university on a general basis, whether they started there or coming from the outside?
I'm referring to the ability of an organizational culture to determine the success rate of the startup.
Do you want to take a crack at that?
I'm new to Oregon, so I'm going to stick my neck out here. Not speaking specifically to UL, but in academia in general, you see the full continuum. There are institutions where there is a vibrant sense of community around entrepreneurship. They have promotion and tenure tracks that acknowledge that, which is a nice way to support a junior faculty who want to pursue startup opportunities. But then you also see the other end of the spectrum that is really kind of the old guard, if you will, where there's a lot of faculty that vilify what we're doing. You know, I'm a dirty money grubber over here instead of trying to just do what's great for the world. Sometimes you can't do the best thing for the world without having some financial motive behind it as well. And so that tide is turning. We see a difference with the junior faculty that are coming on, much more interest in startup formation, around innovation, and how they view commercialization as the end game for their research. But that tide hasn't turned yet. It's one of my biggest problems, frankly, and having to tackle and how to build that and foster that culture of innovation and entrepreneurship.
Thank you, Christine. Any other questions for our panelists today? Yes. Yeah, so he's talking about like transitioning from being in the program, right, and then getting the business going, and what are kind of the capacities that you have, and is there crossover between academia and the businesses once it's a business? Am I kind of getting the gist of that? Yeah. Yeah, and so you're building relationships with administrators and with students, and to what capacity?
I might be able to partially answer that. So universities will, want to use the word utilize, but they will utilize the students in various ways, and it kind of just depends on what is existing at the university. So, most, I think all of our universities have a business college, and there are programs that are separate from, at least in our case, from a lot of what we do, where they will work with businesses that are usually in an early stage and help them, make a plan or achieve some kind of goal, whether they need some market research done or they need to figure out whether or not they should, take a certain kind of investment or a bank loan or whatever. They do a lot of things that are kind of like business consulting services that the students will do. In terms of, sort of my world, we have a program that ended and is starting again where we'll have graduate students come in and they'll look at new inventions that are coming in, and they'll do an early stage dive into that and see, is this something that should be patented? Is there a market here? Should this be a startup or should this be a license? And they're starting to ask those kind of questions, the same kind of things I would, but they have different viewpoints, different expertise, and it's really helpful as an outreach mechanism because they are working with a faculty member who is their mentor, so they're sharing information with that faculty member about the types of work that they're doing, which helps those faculty over time if they're recalcitrant about innovation and outreach, they might break down that barrier a little bit for us. But at the same time, a lot of these scientists, at the university start to see themselves in roles that are non-pure science tracks for their future career. Maybe they want to be an entrepreneur, maybe they want to work at a consulting firm, maybe they want to go to law school and become a patent lawyer, and so it provides them opportunities to see themselves in something other than an academic or industry research track, but their skills and expertise help us out as well. Was that a decent answer? Okay.
I can
Thanks,
tackle the
Travis.
top-up question. So you were talking about the students, but at the administration side and leadership, that is the piece that is so crucial to this culture piece we were just talking about. At the top, the president, the vice president for research, all of the deans, do they embrace this challenge of startup formation and innovation for academia? It really dictates the environment then, and they are also crucial to helping us getting the funding that we need to be successful here as well. So while they may not be sitting in the trenches coaching individual companies, that's probably not their best use of their skills, frankly. Instead, they're there to be advocates. And it's so important that we have strong advocates at the top of the university for what we're doing.
Thanks, Christine. Yes.
So far, it sounds like a lot of this has been focused on early stage pre-product companies. Do you guys also work with companies that have already developed the product? And also, what does the application process look like to engage?
Yeah, so you talked a lot about startups. Do you work with existing products, and what does the application process look like for that?
Sure. Most of our programs focus on early stage. If there's a company that is interested, for example, in going back through one of our accelerator programs, we've done that before. Maybe they launched too early, or they launched with a product market ill fit, if you will, and want to come back through and kind of refine that. We've done that a couple times. Often we do look for entrepreneurs or folks that are involved in the company to have some connections to the university, or at minimum a science and tech-based kind of innovation effort moving forward. We've gone down the path before where it's not that, and it's been a little clunky to integrate it in. And then if there are ways, I'll say this, at least for my team, everyone on my team kind of has this philosophy of we're going to give you an hour of our time minimum, regardless if you're going to utilize any of our programs, to see if we can connect you with whoever or whatever we're aware of. So we may not have programs per se that are later stage, to really knock it out of the park for that type of company, but we have enough connections to entities and investors or otherwise that we could probably put some meaningful things in front of you.
Yeah, and then, I'm on the collaborations and entrepreneurship team at my university. So we talked about entrepreneurship, but we didn't talk about collaborations. So we actually have multiple members of my team focused on building external relationships. So kind of strategic research sponsored research agreements is a big part of what we do, where companies will actually come in, they see an innovator at the university that has some expertise that they think would be really helpful, and they can actually sponsor work in their lab to help move their technology forward. Sometimes the innovator themselves can start a company based off of that, or it helps just move the platform forward for the company sponsoring the research. So I think lots of ways for external kind of partners to work within the university environment and take advantage of the expertise.
That's great. And then if he wants to apply, and I think that he does, where would he go to get started on that?
So we have a team of alliance managers that we can get you connected with. If you look at the Collaborations and Entrepreneurship website, we have all sorts of ways to interact with the university, and just reach out. I think as
Cool.
you've heard from all of us, everyone's happy to engage and give you some time and see where things go.
That's great. Okay, I have one more question in the back right here. Okay. Sure. Yeah, so if you're not in academia, like how do you access these? Yeah.
I think for SBIR specifically, I'd connect straight to Business Oregon. They've got fantastic resources and programs.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, thank you so much, Arsh and Brian and Travis, Christine and Philip. This has been fantastic. So connect with these folks throughout the rest of the conference if you have additional questions. How about a round of applause for our panelists and our